off my phone.
Yeah.
So
Hi,
that
everybody. How are you doing? Sorry we're a little late. We had some technical difficulties. I've been having trouble with my email for the last week and a half, and I don't know what was going on there. Was that your side, Barbara, or mine? But anyway,
was mine. I have a smoke alarm. The battery is changing, and it's too high up. I have to wait for somebody else to do it.
I take my broom and punch at it. That's what I do. Anyway, all right. Thanks for joining us, everybody, today. And as I said, we were having some technical difficulties, and mainly it's because of my email issues. I thought I had them solved, but apparently not. But let's see who all is here. I'm scrolling up here to the beginning. And hey, Juno. Oh, good. You're here today. Hey, let's see here. Dream Journey One, Chris MK. Let's see who else is here. Hey, In-Car. Hey, Susie 007. Hey, Chris. Hey, Son of What? Hey, Butterfly Kisses. Thank you for the information you're putting out there for me. Hey, White Dragon. My favorite one. Comment. Hey, what? Let's see. Who is that? Susie. Stephen Smith, who put abducted question mark. I did laugh at that. We might have been abducted. Old Painter. Hey, Jen Carr. Hey, Wendy. Thanks for joining us today. Hey, MJ. Hey, Teresa. Anyway, thanks for joining us. And of course, we got a fascinating story from Barbara. And I know y'all all know her, but Barbara Lamb is, let's see, I'm going to pull up my stuff here before I get going here. But she is a world famous regression therapist for ET regression therapists. If anybody wants to go back and find out what their ET connection is, Barbara that's what she does, and that's what she specializes in. She's also a researcher, and she's also an experiencer herself, and she's an author. And anyway, she is just world famous. I've had a session with her. It's great. So anybody wanting to find out about their ET connections or experiences, book a session with Barbara. So Barbara, go ahead and let's start from your beginning, because I think your story about your ET connection is just fascinating, just because your journey of, I don't want anybody to know, and then all of a sudden you were okay. And I'd like to hear about the beginning, and then to the journey of when you became okay to let everybody, it was you that were having experiences.
Okay. Well, it's kind of a long story, so I'll try to encapsulate it. But I became a licensed psychotherapist in 1976 and have been doing that work for many, many years now, of course. And then in the mid 1980s, I became trained in regression therapy, mostly for the purposes of past life regression therapy. But anyway, the regression methods could be used in a whole variety of ways to help people find out about what they want to know more about themselves, about what may have occurred for themselves. So I was doing that through the late 1980s and into the 90s. And in 1991, people started coming to me for regressions to do with unusual visits they had had by unusual beings. Basically, that they usually turned out to be extraterrestrial encounters that they had had. And we were able to go back to whichever incident that they wanted to know about and find out the details of that extraterrestrial encounter. So that got me very interested, of course, in that whole subject, which I had not been aware of previously. And I had previously thought that UFOs that we saw sometimes in movies and elsewhere, and extraterrestrials, I thought that that was all science fiction, very interesting science fiction. But when people started coming to me and we did regressions starting in 1991, I began to realize, oh wow, no, this has got to be real. These people are having these real experiences with these other beings. So the same year in 1990, I began doing many, many years of crop circle research, going to England every summer and going into as many crop circles as we could possibly get into, and was extremely interested in that whole subject. And
Were you going with people when you went over there for the crop circles?
I usually just went by myself,
Okay.
but over the years, I began to know other people who were going there to research this phenomenon. And after several years, I began leading tours, taking people into the crop circle. I would meet them at Heathrow Airport on a particular day and drive them down to Wiltshire County, which is the heart of the crop circle phenomenon, and where I would have arranged for us all to stay. And then I would take them every day for a week into a different crop circle every day, sometimes two crop circles in one day if they were located, reasonably close to each other. So anyway, that was absolutely wonderful. Now, another part of this leading up to my own experience is that one of my clients who came for many regressions to her extraterrestrial experiences, she also channeled a being, an extraterrestrial being, who lived on the planet which we call Antares.
Mhm.
And this being, this extraterrestrial being, and I had many, many conversations when this woman would come for her sessions. Sometimes we did a regression, and sometimes we did the channeling, and sometimes both. Anyway, this extraterrestrial being, whom I was coming to know and to respect greatly, um, in the winter, January of 1994, in one of these conversations, he said, "Barbara, since you are so very interested in the crop circles, and I know that you're going to England every summer, you're totally dedicated to this research. If you would like to, you could be taken for the making of one of the crop circles." Whoa.
Yeah. 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 Sign me up.
And actually, I was kind of afraid to agree to do that. I mean, I just didn't know what would happen, and I wanted,
Right.
of course, to be assured that I would be brought back safely. And
Well, times are different then too.
yes, times were different, and I didn't know as much as I know now. Didn't know so much then about the really benevolent, favorable, wonderful extraterrestrials there are, among others who, are not bad, but they're not ones that we like, and we don't like some of the things that they do, especially do to us. But anyway, um, I was intrigued, but I just wasn't ready to do it, and it took me 6 months to be able to feel like, yes, okay, I could take that chance. I would like to be taken for the making of a crop circle, thinking that probably that meant that the crop circles were made by extraterrestrial beings, or at least certainly by some sort of extraterrestrial intelligence. So finally, in July of that year, 1994, when I was just about ready to go to England for my annual crop circle research, there was a channeling that happened, and this same being um, said, "Well, how about it? You're just about to go to England." By the way, he knew just about everything that we do
Right.
here, even if we don't know about them particularly.
Right.
But and I said, "Yes, I've decided I would like to be taken for the making of a cropsicum." Thought about it a lot, and and I feel confident about that now. So he said, "Okay, well, what you have to do then is talk to them. You may not know who you're talking to, but whoever are the ones making the crop circles, just talk to them out loud and convince them, since you're not already in contact with them, you have to convince them that you would like to be taken for the making of a crop circle. So, on my way to the airport that summer, uh, for about 45 minutes straight, I was talking out loud to whoever it is, whoever or whatever it is that is making these beautiful crop circles. And as I was talking to them, I was realizing that I was feeling more and more excited and more energized about that. And I was praising them and thanking them for the beautiful crop circles and thanking them for the healing that some of them do with many human beings and inspiring that many of them do. But I was particularly focused on whoever is making the crop circles. And then I got to the airport and, you know, schlepped my luggage and got on the airplane and flew over to England. And I was there for about a month that summer, 1994. And on the last night before the last day that I would be out there looking for crop circles, I just suddenly had the thought as I was about ready to go to bed, I had the thought that, I don't think anything like that has happened. I don't think I've been taken for the making of a crop circle. So I just asked again, just very simply, quickly, but vehemently. And I turned out the light, the bedside light, as I was getting into bed. And then immediately, well, within a few seconds, I saw silhouettes of three short beings with relatively big heads coming toward me from the area of the window. There was some night light coming in through the window. And it resulted in they came over to me, and I was out of consciousness immediately. And I didn't wake up or know anything until the next morning when the alarm clock woke me up. And I was with a conference group, and we all got onto a big bus and a double decker bus. I was up on the top deck, and we were driving toward a place that we were going to visit in Avebury in Wiltshire County, England. And as we came very close to Avebury, and we had been that way the day before, and I noticed, looking out from the upper deck, I noticed in a field that there was a big area of depressed wheat, and that's usually the earmark of a crop circle. So I was very excited. Oh, I think there's a new crop circle there. And we had been by that field the previous day, and there had been no depression in the field. So it was significant that this particular day there was a depression in the wheat. So anyway, when our bus stopped about quarter of a mile past that area, I ran down the stairs and jumped out of the bus and joined a friend who was following us in a rented car. And I said, I think there's a new crop circle right back there. And she said, hop in. And two other people heard this and they hopped in too. And we were the first ones to go back to that field and walk through the field and into an absolutely brand new, wonderful crop circle. It probably had been made maybe about 3 or 4 hours earlier in the dark of night, and it was still kind of crackling with energy, a very soft, crispy sound like pouring milk on a bowl of Rice Krispies. It reminded me of that, this lovely little sound. And in other words, it was full of energy. And we were the first ones to go into that crop circle. Well, I didn't know at the time that I had been taken the night before, although I had a conscious memory of seeing those 3 beings coming. Well, anyway, after the trip to England and I was home again, I asked one of my colleagues to come and regress me to that night, when I saw the 3 beings coming toward me in the hotel, bedroom. I was on the first floor, by the way, and, and it came out all the details of my being taken by those 3 beings up through where 2 walls meet the ceiling and up into the air and into a small craft, and got all the details of how they, in that craft, did make a crop circle, and it turned out, that I could tell by the way it was being made, even though I couldn't see it because the craft, of course, the floor of the craft was under me. But anyway, it turned out that that was the same crop circle that I had discovered the next day, which made it especially fun. So the regression was extremely interesting to me because it showed me about these beings who came, 3 beings who came and took me and sat me in a chair, a barrel shaped chair, in the right in the middle of this small craft. And it showed the details of actually making the crop circle. And in that experience, I saw 2 beings whom I would call pilots. They seemed to be navigating this small UFO. And then I know that the original 3 beings were behind me. I never got a really good look at them, but I was aware that they were definitely there, and they did return me back to my room at the inn very safely, and surely no damage done whatsoever, and let me sleep for the rest of the night before waking up with the alarm.
Well, I
So
know
anyway,
when you're in, everybody always asks me a question when I have experiences. But when you're in the moment, did you ask them any questions like, why are you doing this? I know. I mean, because
no.
you're so in awe of what's happening. You just
Oh,
don't think
yeah.
about asking questions. So
No.
did you ever find out why? I mean, in your all research and everything, did you ever find out why they were making them?
No.
Okay.
No.
It doesn't seem like
No.
anybody knows
I
why
mean,
they're
it was a wonderful opportunity, but I
kind of
was just so busy noticing all the details and noticing those 2 beings in front of me and being aware of not seeing, but being aware of the 3 behind me, and then it was a very quick operation.
right.
I mean, I was only clipped into that seat of for a few seconds, I think, before it started moving around and sending out an energy which sounded like a swoosh sound
Yeah.
in the middle of the craft. That's the way it sounded and seemed. And I was aware that we were moving around in making that crop circle from above. And I don't think it was terribly high above the crop. I would just guess from the little bit I saw when the craft tilted and I could look out the front window, probably only 50 to 100 feet above the crop. I can't say that that's how all the crop circles are made, but that is how that one was made.
And you don't
Yeah.
even know if it's the same beings that do all the crop circles. Could be different beings.
Well, it could be. We just really don't know. I don't know anybody who knows
I
that one way or
don't
the other.
think I've heard all sorts of theories, but
Oh, yes.
I don't think anybody is like asked, why are you making this? Because as I said, you're in the moment and you don't ask questions. You're just so like, oh, look what's going on. And
You're just so fascinated with everything and just taking it all in. So, as far as I know, nothing was said to me and I didn't say anything to them.
Right.
Anyway, that experience, I think, um, garnered the attention of some other beings because there were 3 other incidents that happened to me, different years, with totally different groups of beings. At least they certainly looked totally different, and I feel convinced that they are. So the next experience was about 3 years later in 1997, and the circumstances were that I, had been at a meeting up in the Santa Barbara, California area, which is about 2.5 hours drive from where I was living. And at midnight, that particular night, I was in my car, my Subaru wagon, and leaving that meeting place at 12 midnight and started driving down the coast to go to my home. And I noticed some very unusual things that I wondered about. The first was that seemed to be no other cars on that freeway, and it was around midnight on a Friday night, and
Wow.
surely people would be going up the coast to the Santa Barbara area, which is a wonderful place to visit, or further on up the coast, or people would be coming down the coast on that freeway, but there was no traffic at all in front of me or behind me. And I thought that is really peculiar, but I'm okay. I'll just keep going. And then I saw a big circular, absolutely circular flash of light to my right, which was off the coast of Southern California as I was driving south. And it only lasted a moment, just like, and I thought, wow, what was that? It couldn't have been lightning because lightning is a more diffuse
Right.
area of light. This was a perfect circle of white light with sort of a greenish tinge to it. Oh, well, that's strange. Oh, well, I don't know what, no, this is a weird night. And, but I'm okay, and kept driving. And then I noticed that there was a big arc of light over to my left, that would be east. And I thought that's strange because I know that there are no towns over there. So what could possibly be making that big arc of light? Oh, well, I guess we'll just keep going. And then I noticed that there was a big, what I thought was a trailer truck, parked partly on the freeway, partly off the side. And it seemed to have lights around the bottom of it and 2 or 3 people walking around the end of what I thought was this big trailer truck. I just assumed, as we tend to do, that the truck must have had a flat tire, and they had put up flares, and they were going to repair the tire. That's what I assumed, just a perfectly normal thing. I assumed incorrectly. And when I came past the opposite end of the truck, suddenly there was a big light filling my windshield from the outside, a bright light of sort of a peachy pink color, excuse me, and a crack in the windshield right in front of my face in the driver's seat. It was sort of a spider web shape of a crack. And I was really concerned because I thought, what if it blows in? What if it gives way and all this broken glass hits me right in the face? So I was going to slow down and stop and reverse and back up and go and talk to those people walking past the opposite end of the truck. But I heard a big voice in my head that said, no, don't slow down, don't stop, don't drive back. Just keep going, going, going all the way home. Woo! And it was so insistent, that voice, that I thought that that's what I did. But I found out later, when I had a regression to, what was it that made the crack and what were all those weird things about the freeway trip. I found out that my car and I had, before the crack and the peach colored light, my car and I had been taken up on a diagonal beam of light and into a craft. And once we got into the craft, we, meaning I and my car, because I was driving alone, um, and we got sort of slid up through an opening in the bottom of this craft and then sort of slid out on the floor. And then immediately there were, 20 or 30 little beings, probably only about 3 or 3.5 feet tall, and sort of a bluish gray color, looking like they didn't have clothing on, but maybe they had tight fitting suits. I'm not sure. But anyway, they had big heads and big almond shaped eyes. They were completely a cobalt blue color, very, very pretty, actually, and tiny little features. And so all of these little guys, they all looked very, very similar to each other. And they all swarmed over to my car that I was sitting in. And they jumped up on the hood and looked in through the front windshield, and they came around the sides looking in the window, and they even crawled up on the top, a couple of them, and hung over the car and looked in the windshield right at me. And I just was fascinated with them. They were so, to my opinion, they were so cute, sort of endearing. They seemed very, very childlike and very curious, extremely curious about this person and this car. And of course, we humans look as different to them as they do to us, I'm sure. And then two of them somehow opened the passenger door, even though I know that I had locked the cars before I left that meeting in Santa Barbara. And these two little beings slid into the passenger seat and sat right on top of my purse and my little peppermint candies that I had there to keep me awake in case I would get sleepy on the drive home. And as that was happening, two other beings opened my driver's door, even though I know that was locked. How they do that, I have no idea. And they ushered me out and sort of, I was upright in a standing position, but a little bit off the floor. And they sort of, without really touching me, it seemed like sort of from the armpit area, they were floating me along across that room and through a door into another room. And then in the other room, as we were entering that, I could see that there was a platform about a foot or so high and a big pole coming up and a chair. The pole seemed to be attached to the back of the chair, and the chair did not look comfortable at all. It was looked like a very straight chair, wooden perhaps, I'm not sure. I had the impression of its being wooden, and then straight wooden arms for me to put my arms on, and a very, very straight back, no cushioning, no softening. And I was ushered over onto that platform and into the chair, and then fastened with some sort of a belt um, to stay in that chair. And then they brought down from that column what looked like a metal beehive shaped contraction and fit it around my head like a helmet, and particularly adjusted little sliding aspects to fit my temples. so it would really fit my head closely. It didn't hurt, but it felt like having a sort of a small size hat on.
Were you
That
scared? Were you scared at any time during all this?
not really, because the I was puzzled,
Mhm.
but I wouldn't say scared because these little beings were just so interesting to me
And
with their
curious.
curiosity and all looking almost exactly the same, all 20 or 30 of them. And so they fit this in, and then they all formed like a curtain around me. So they were, I was up a foot on this platform sitting, so they were a little bit lower than I. And they were just looking at me and nudging each other to get a little bit closer to looking at this human. And I was just really busy for a couple of minutes, I'm sure, just looking at all of them and their curiosity and thinking that, wow, I don't know how people could be afraid of these. I had never heard of beings exactly like that before, although I had heard from some of my clients about beings who seemed to be small and big eyed and very likable,
Right.
and some who were not so likable. But anyway, I had heard that there were likable beings, and these certainly seemed to be very likable. So I was busy looking at them probably for a couple of minutes. And then I noticed that in back of them, sort of like on the other side of this room, there was a very different being, a tall, totally white being, like paper white,
Hmm.
and with white clothing. I didn't see the bottom of the clothing because these little beings were in the way, but might have been a long white robe. Anyway, he was very different, and his eyes were kind of longer, almost rectangular shape, but sort of curved at the corner.
Hmm.
And they were dark eyes, black eyes, but there was something that looked rather friendly about him. It wasn't that he was exactly smiling, but he just seemed to be okay. And he said, "Ah, Barbara, good, good. You're aware of where you are. And oh, by the way, from this helmet sort of thing that had been placed around my head, I was feeling a current coming through, like an electrical current, but not overpowering. I could definitely feel it, but it was not hurting me. And of course, I was curious about it. And he said, "You're probably wondering what we're doing." And I said, "Yes, I am wondering." And he said, um, "Do not worry about this. We are not harming you in any way. We are simply uh, taking memories from your brain, making copies of memories from your brain
Wow.
about all the people that you have worked with who've had experiences with other beings from space. And there's some of us who are really, really interested to know what these people have experienced. In other words, what it looks like and feels like and is like from the point of view of the humans who are taken
Hmm.
by many of us beings. And at that point, I was being regressed to this experience by Dolores Cannon, who had been doing lots of regression work, was very, very accomplished at doing it. And she said, "Barbara, ask him what they do with this information they're taking from your brain." And by the way, he had assured me that he was not removing my memories
Hmm.
from all the work I had been doing with experiencers at that point. But he said, "We're just making a copy of this information." So Dolores asked me to ask him what they do with this information. And he told me we broadcast it. And then Dolores, I was repeating what I was hearing and experiencing, repeating it out loud. And Dolores said, Barbara, ask him, how do they broadcast it? And and he answered that. And he said, well, we just tune into a signal. He said, your earth is surrounded with signals. And you know that because of your televisions and radios and so forth. We just find one of the signals we like and we just attach to that and broadcast it. And then Dolores said, Barbara, ask him who listens to that broadcast.
That's a
And
good question.
yes, yes. And he answered, he said, well, there are many of us who visit from space, from all over space, and visit the Earth. And some of the visitors are very interested in how they are affecting human beings. And some of them are not. The ones who are not interested, they just don't tune into that channel. Just like you, humans on Earth, you tune into radio or television channels or internet or whatever, that you're interested in and not to the ones that you're not interested in. So at that point, the being said, she does not, referring to Dolores, she does not have to ask through you. She can just ask her questions. I will hear it and I will answer through you, Barbara. So that's what we did for the rest of the session, which went on for almost 2 more hours.
Oh my gosh, how was the total long? How long was the whole session then? About
Oh, about maybe 2.5 hours.
okay.
Yeah. And and Dolores, being the wonderful investigator as she was, and wonderful regression therapist too, she had loads of questions in her mind, and she kept asking one after the other, and he kept answering through me, and I would repeat it to her. He always spoke in sort of one sentence or at the most two sentences worth for each question, and I could easily repeat that to her. And then this went on for a couple of hours, and Dolores was tape recording it, and then suddenly the tape recording was finished, the tape ended, and she looked at her watch apparently and said, oh, I'm going to have to finish. I have another commitment to go to. And then he said, well, if you two would like to do this again, if you would like more information from me, do what you did today. He said, get together again, and I will be very, very happy to answer any more questions that you have. So that was really wonderful for us. We definitely wanted to do that again. And of course, I was returned safely after that experience, and did drive home. That after I was returned to the car, that's when the crack happened in my windshield and the peach colored light, and I kept driving. I just had not been aware at the time that this whole other thing had happened, of being taken up onto this spaceship, until I was regressed and all the details came out then. Anyway, Dolores and I got together about 2.5 months later and did another regression. And this time she had a long list of questions to ask.
I bet she did.
And I had a long list of questions to ask. And he was wonderful at asking them. So that was very, very fruitful and very very wonderful. That whole experience really was very, very positive for me.
Mhm.
I'm delighted that I had it and feel very privileged
Yeah.
that I had that. So then the third experience was a few years
Well, I'm gonna
later.
go right back to the questions that y'all asked. Everybody's wanting to know what questions did they ask? What were the answers? So that you,
Oh, well, they were a lot about, his group of beings and how they live, what their culture is like, their society is like, and, uh, mostly about that, but lots of detail, including their way of breeding and reproducing.
was this the
I
tall white one that was giving you this information?
It was a tall white being,
Okay,
right. Now, I've heard many people, uh, describe some of the beings that they have contact with as tall whites. In fact, it's kind of like a species that I've
right,
heard many, many times, the tall white being. I don't know if this particular being was like them because I haven't heard enough descriptions of
right.
those tall white beings, but he was tall, thin, and white, and with the really, really big black eyes, and seemed to be, to me, a very, very decent, cooperative, helpful being. Yeah, he was not about investigating my body or anything like that. It was all the mental material that I had from having worked with many, many experiencers by that time. Okay, let's go on now. My third experience was in one of the years of the early 2000s, probably around 2003 or 2004. I've sort of lost track of the year. But anyway, I was continuing to do lots of regressions with people who'd experienced extraterrestrial encounters. And one afternoon, when I was not doing a regression, I walked from my office room in my home, walked into the living room, intending to go to another part of the house. And when I stepped into the living room, to my great surprise, there was somebody there. And I was really surprised because I know that when I'm alone in the house like that, I always have my doors locked. I mean, it's just a regular habit I've had since childhood. But here was somebody standing there in the middle of the living room, and the one standing there was a reptilian male being. Now, that all was just an incredible surprise.
Yeah.
However, he, even though being reptilian, he just seemed like such a nice guy. He seemed so friendly and so safe and not huge like some of them are described to be, but kind of like the size of a, middle height or small to middle height
Right.
man. And anyway, he just had such a nice feeling about him, such a nice presence that I went right over to him and he had his hand out in a handshake position. And I took that hand, we held hands in a handshake position for the next few minutes while he was there. And during that few minutes, I was very close to his face and looking up, fascinated by his round eyes that were kind of shiny like marbles. They reminded me of yellow marbles, but they had in them um, a pupil that was like a little vertical lightning strike shape, not just a slit. But anyway, they were just fascinating, and I was looking at them and with my peripheral vision, taking in the colors and the textures of his head and his neck and his shoulders. He was very muscular, reminded me of a like an Olympic gymnast performer,
Wow.
a male gymnast. I mean, beautifully structured and muscled, and lots of interesting colors in his skin that was sort of variegated, sort of mottled and variegated. I was very intrigued with that. Various shades of green and brown. I remember a little bit of sienna brown in there, um, and then an interesting texture, which is difficult to describe. It wasn't exactly bumpy and it wasn't exactly scaly, but it certainly wasn't smooth either. So it's very hard to find descriptive words for it. But anyway, I held his hand for a few minutes and he was talking to me the whole time. I don't think that I talked to him. I was just so fascinated with what he was saying, and I heard it in my mind. So, of course, he was talking telepathically rather than with a voice. And that also suggests that I had the ability, which I never would have known about before, I had the ability to hear him telepathically. And that makes me think that maybe all of us have that ability, but we've just never practiced it. We
Right.
just never discovered it. We've never been told, that we have that. We don't see examples of that, except in the extraterrestrial phenomenon, people see that. So anyway, he said basically that he was there, to validate for me for sure that many, many people are visited by what he called beings from elsewhere.
Well, that's a good description.
He didn't say alien or extraterrestrial or any of the terms that we use from our point of view. He just said um, beings from elsewhere, and that he had been especially bred to be a friendly ambassador to validate for me when I was conscious and awake in the light of day. And I had lots of daylight coming in my living room because I had big corner window light coming in from two directions. And so that you know absolutely from your own experience that yes, indeed, we do exist and we do come and visit people. And he said that others like him um, have been bred to do the same thing with many experiencers, that they will come in the light of day and just appear for a moment until the person realizes that he or she sees them, and then they disappear. And that's what happened with me. He just suddenly poofed, was gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. so so
Well,
that was just amazing too.
yeah. Now, in the beginning, because it's Dolores that wrote about your experiences in her book, right?
Oh, yes, the 1997 on the 101 freeway experience. She wrote in her book called The Custodians.
And what was your name at that time? Because you didn't let everybody know who you were, did you?
But I wasn't ready to be publicly known as having had experiences too. And also, I was not the typical experiencer. A typical experiencer is one who begins those visits from the beings during childhood or maybe even during infancy and
Mhm.
has a whole series of them up through many of their adult years. And that was not the case with me. So she calls me Bonnie the investigator rather than Barbara the therapist.
Right.
And that's okay. Since then, I haven't minded, like obviously right now, I'm not minding sharing about those experiences. Um,
Well, we have a
because,
couple of questions that have come in. Do you want to take some of the questions, or do you have some more to tell us?
what was the question?
We have from our viewers, we have some questions.
Okay.
Wondering if you want to take a few questions from them.
Sure. Just really quickly, there was a fourth experience
I want to go with your fourth experience then.
in which I was taken up through the hallway of my house one sunny afternoon.
Oh,
I
wow.
was facing a window and I could see it was mid-afternoon. I had just come in from sweeping my patio to use the bathroom, and was coming out again to return swimming. But anyway, I noticed going through that hallway that it was dark outside. And I thought, wait a minute, I've just come in. It's probably taken me 2 minutes to come in and use the bathroom. And it was bright and sunny, and now it's dark. And I realized on my watch that I had missed a couple of hours of time. So that turned out to be, I had a regression on that one later. And that turned out to be that I was taken right up through my hallway, through the guest room on top, through the roof, over the house, and then on up into what appeared to me to be like a big, huge ball of peachy pink colored cotton candy. That's what it looked like rather than a metallic craft. It looked like this soft thing that I was being taken up into. And there were lovely, lovely beings, um, almost transparent beings, all lined up, about 8 or 10 of them. And they were lovely beings. And that was for the purpose of their congratulating me for having finished my book called Alien Experiences with Nadine Lalich as my partner in that. And it was all about 25 different cases of different types of ET experiences that some of my clients had had. So different experiences and different beings who had taken them. And anyway, this group of lovely, almost transparent beings said, thank you. It is so wonderful that you are getting this information out to other people in the world. And we totally are pleased that you're doing that because humanity really needs to wake up and know that so many types of beings do exist in what you consider space. And it's time for humanity to know about that too. And so it's all very, very complimentary. And then they said, the combination of you and your partner, Nadine Lalich, it's a brilliant combination. And then they mentioned all of her abilities and skills, and then mentioned my abilities and skills. We each had quite a different skill set,
Mhm.
but still the combination was just ideal for sharing this kind of information. So it was basically a very blessed, complimentary,
What a
positive
nice trip was it to
experience.
hear all that?
Yeah. So anyway, that's what I have experienced. But boy, there have been a few thousand people whom I have regressed to their extraterrestrial experiences. And more, it's coming out that uh, many, many of the experiences that people have with these other beings are very, very positive
Right,
and even inspiring.
right.
And some of them do involve physical checkups and physical procedures. But the more we look into it, the more we realize that a lot of those physical medical type procedures are done to help
Oh,
the,
definitely. Mhm.
they're not only learning a lot about us, which they want to do, but they are really doing a lot of healing work in many different ways. And then many people are also being inspired by the beings. And more people, just in this last year or so, more and more people continue to come to me who are finding out that the beings who are taking them are inspiring them to do a helpful mission
Mhm.
here on Earth, and to that is their life purpose for being here, is to do a particular kind of helpful mission
Right.
during their lifetime. So that is really wonderful. And some of them are finding that they can get messages, they can channel the beings. Some of them, are healed by the beings or sort of taken care of by the beings, guarded by the beings. So there's a lot of very favorable information coming out about all of this from people's experiences. So anyway, I'm ready for questions if
Okay.
you
I,
would like to
I
ask.
was, I was going to make one comment, Barbara, that because I am a healer, I have been noticing that the beings, the tall whites or whatever you want to call them, do show up with shorter grays. And it seems like to me, there's usually three of them that show up in the room, a tall white or just the grays. And that it's almost like the tall whites are using them. I'm not sure if they can't come, if they can come down to the level or they're using the grays. But it always seems like that combination when it's healing or doing some kind of procedure. So
That it's done by the smaller grays, you mean?
right, and directed by the tall being, the tall white being. It's
Yeah.
always a combination that I'm seeing. Because so now when I see those three or see that group, I know that they're there for healing. When I'm seeing it for somebody else, I've recognized it now that they are the healers. They are the ones that are doing things to help people physically or medically, and that's how they show up. And it sounds like to me that's what showed up for you was that group was a tall white and a
Well, yes, and I do hear this a great deal, that a person is lying on a medical table and various things are going on. And it's very typical for the person to worry about that right away because they feel like they're being tampered with, and maybe sometimes they are as well.
right.
But still, in many, many situations, there are the smaller beings, the typical gray beings doing some of that, including healing procedures. And there usually are uh, taller beings, one or more. Sometimes they're tall white beings, sometimes they're mantis beings
Mm-hmm.
or onlooking, seeming to be like the
Director.
guide or the teacher
Yeah.
for the smaller ones to do this healing. And so they're right there. They may not be absolutely doing it themselves, but it seems to be that they're the ones in charge
Yeah, I
and
agree.
who know about this. So that's happened with many, many situations of people I have regressed to these experiences.
All right. Well, we have time for just a couple of questions. So, Susie, you want to bring up a question for us? Hey, Spirit Watcher Suzanne, does the regression need to be in person?
No, they don't. Thank goodness to Zoom and StreamYard and Skype and even FaceTime. I do a lot of regressions.
Right. Mine
That's
was done by Zoom. Yeah, my regression session with you, which I wanted
right.
to get another one here soon.
Okay.
All
I'll
right.
be
So next,
very happy to. Yes, so that's a wonderful thing that we have the technology. And then yet just yesterday, a woman and I were trying to connect on Zoom and couldn't, and tried to connect on Skype and couldn't, and tried to connect on FaceTime and it couldn't. And she kept saying, she said, I'm just such a technological klutz. I really don't know how to work any of these. So finally, after a half an hour of that, we tried just doing it on the telephone,
right,
and that worked remarkably well. There's a person back east who has done a few sessions on the telephone, and so even that works.
right,
And some people prefer to do the session in person, and they're willing to come to San Diego, California, where I am. But so many people are way too far away to do that, or even some people who could drive here within an hour or so choose to do it online because they've discovered that that really works perfectly well. So I think that we are very blessed that things are sort of coming together. That many people are waking up to the fact that they've been having these experiences, or they have clues and are wondering if they've had extraterrestrial encounters, and they can't get here, and so often they can't find anybody, who knows how to do this kind of work or who would appreciate this kind of work. Appreciate that people are really having these experiences. So it's just great that they can find me and
Yeah,
do this from wherever they are.
can
So
you tell,
some of these people are in other countries, and
right,
the tricky thing there is figuring out the time difference between here in England or Europe or Australia or wherever.
yeah.
But we get that figured out, and so we can meet at the same time uh, on one of the online platforms. So that's really a wonderful advantage that we all have right now, that we can do that.
Well, can you tell them how to get a hold of you?
Yes, the best way, the simplest way really, is to go to my website, which is barbaralamregressions.com. And on that website, there's a place where you can write in, type in whatever you want. And that's how I get most of the referrals online, actually. They get forwarded to me as an email and then I answer them. I'm a little bit behind in answering them because there are just so many requests that come in, but I will eventually get back to you for sure, and then we can set an appointment and a regression time and have that wonderful experience.
Okay,
I would like to also mention that I have a YouTube channel
right.
now with a lot of different interviews, and some of them are discussions about all kinds of other unusual things that uh, anomalous things that I have experienced because and I share them because there are many people out there who've had some of those too, like for instance out of body experiences or having spirit visitations or having experiences with orbs or having been past lives as extraterrestrials, or many different topics that sort of um, accompany the extraterrestrial phenomenon or the other dimensional aspects of experiences that many of us occasionally have. So that's been really fun to do and to share from my own life and from some of the people I've worked with too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you, Barbara, for coming. We've taken up enough of your time. So thank you for coming and telling us your story. And of course, I'm going to love to have you back on another time. But thank
Okay.
you, everybody, for joining us. Thanks, Susie, for helping us. And just hang on, Barbara, and we'll talk after the show. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody. We'll see you. Oh, we got 2 shows to tell you about. On next Tuesday, I will be on. Oh no, that's the 621 at 2 p.m. That'll be the Solaris Healing Center, and that is on Wednesday. So everybody look at the times at 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 o'clock Eastern time. Also, I'll be appearing on Tearing at Holding Your Space at 1 o'clock Pacific time on Tuesday, and it'll be 4 o'clock Eastern time. So that will be streaming on both channels. So thanks. Join us next week. And thanks, Barbara, again. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. And we'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.